What's going on, guys? Brandon back with another YouTube video here. The NBA season is about here. We're getting about a day or two away from it finally tipping off, and I thought I'd give you guys a little bit of a preview video to get ready for the season. And I'm gonna do a little thing called NBA starting fives, where I count down my five uh, options at various topics, including who I think will be the NBA champion this year. Five people that I think could be MVP contenders, five players that are a little bit under the radar that I think that you should keep your eye on, and lastly, five teams that I think are set to disappoint in this upcoming season. I hope you guys really enjoy this video. I love watching the NBA. I love talking about the NBA. I'm excited for it to get back. It's always one of the most storyline filled sports we have out there, the way we see player movement, trades, things like that. So I'm excited for the season to get going and see how we go with that. So without further ado, let's get started with our first starting five, and that is going to be NBA championship contenders. Counting down from number five, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cleveland Cavaliers had a pretty good year last year. They had 51 wins to only 31 losses. Of course, it was the first season that Donovan Mitchell joined the fray in Cleveland. He came over from Utah, joining Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen. They've had a pretty good team over there for a few years now, and Donovan Mitchell took those boys to the next step up. Vegas has their over under set at 50.5 wins for the season, and they are plus 2,400 to be NBA champions. However, when you look at their team, they've had a nice offseason. They added Amani Bates in the draft, who I absolutely have high hopes for. I really thought he'd be a lot better of a player than we've seen thus far, coming out of high school, going into college and such. I really thought he had potential to be the next Kevin Durant type of player. However, he has not quite developed that far yet. I still do believe that in the right situation with the right coaching, he has potential to still be a very good player. And considering that the Cleveland Cavaliers have a very big hole at the small forward position, I think he's a guy that could potentially fill that hole and be a good player for them. He's a lengthy guy. He can shoot over the top and also go around people. I think he's a good player. But not only that, they also added Jordan Niang and Max Strus in free agency as well. Strus coming over from Miami, Niang coming over from the 76ers. I think those are really nice additions to the team. Niang is a very good player in terms of giving you solid minutes, playing tough defense, being a smart player. He's got that Fred Hoiberg coaching in him. And then Max Struss was a guy that came over from Miami, undrafted guy, really good shooter. Obviously played some big minutes in big playoff situations for Miami this past year. Um, I think just adding those guys that have seen playoff minutes before is a huge thing for Cleveland. Like I said, they have Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen, and those four already are one of the best core pieces you can have when it comes to building an NBA team. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell and Garland are both all NBA type players at the guard position. Donovan Mitchell, I think personally, is maybe the best shooting guard currently in basketball. He's a great player. He can score at all three levels. He can run the point guard position at times. And as we've seen thus far, he seems to have taken another step when it comes to the playoffs. And I just think that he's the guy that's going to have to carry them to the championship if that's what they're going to do. Um, However, they are in the Eastern Conference, which I think is the two top teams are in the Eastern Conference, in my opinion, which I'll touch on here in a little bit. So they're going to have to get through them. But to get through those guys, you're going to have to stop a Giannis type. And Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen are those guys that can maybe not necessarily stop Giannis. I don't know if it's physically possible to do that, but definitely to slow him down. It's almost a Twin Towers type look down there. They're both a little bit more agile. They can move their feet a little bit more. They're not so stuck down in the post. I think Mobley needs to add a little bit more of a perimeter game to help the offense flow a little bit. At times, both of those guys can kind of clog up the paint. But as a result, you see a high number of rebounds go to those guys. And as a whole, I just really like what Cleveland's done. The only piece they really lost during the offseason that hadn't played a ton of minutes for them was Jetty Osman. I don't think he's a super great player. That three spot was kind of being bounced around between him and Isaac Okoro. Um, he was never really to take that, like, able to grab that position and make it his own. So while he does know the offense and a little bit of chemistry with his teammates, I don't think it's a huge loss. Coming in at number four, I have the Golden State Warriors, another my first team in the Western Conference. Uh, they had a 44 and 38 record last season. Their over under for wins this year is set at 47.5, and they are plus 1,400 odds to be NBA champs this season. So obviously the big new piece in Golden State is the addition of all-time point guard Chris Paul. Uh, on the flip side, they lost Andre Iguodala, Jordan Poole, and Dante DiVincenzo. So it's going to be a very different looking Golden State team than what we're used to in the past. Um, Obviously, with Iguodala going out the door, you're losing a lot of veteran experience. And while he maybe didn't play as many minutes as he had the past couple seasons, he was still a valuable asset from the bench in terms of an almost coaching perspective. And Dante DiVincenzo was a great rotational piece for them. And something that I think that's kind of gone under the radar is how good of a steals man he is. He's really good at getting on ball pressure, poking the ball loose, and stuff like that. And I'm not sure they were able to fill that role with what they had. Because obviously, CP3 is the guy that came in alongside Dario Saric, and it's going to be interesting at what his role is going to be with the Warriors, whether he's a starter along Steph Curry, whether he's going to be a six man, trying to use his veteran leadership to kind of help a younger bench unit. It's going to be interesting to see. Uh, if they do start Chris Paul, I can see them running out a lineup of Chris Paul, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, and Draymond Green. And in that type of situation, obviously they're going to have a severe lack of size. They're very short. Saric is a guy, 6'9", 6'10" ish. He's got that European type game, so he can kind of be a little bit more all around of a player, more so than your standard low post or power forward, excuse me. So it'd be interesting to see what can do. I think he's a pretty underrated passer, so I think you'll be able to see some nice things from the post, finding open shooters, kind of in ways that Draymond does, and to a much more extent of a Jokic type. But I think that's where Golden State's going to have to find a lot of their shots this year is having guys create from the post, whether that be Draymond or Saric, to kick out to guys like Clay or Curry, and maybe even have Chris Paul be a playmaker a bit more so. You have the young guys on the bench: Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, potentially Brandon Podminski is the guy they drafted this year. He's a shooter. You're gonna have to see how those guys are going to be able to come out and play. I think this will be the best season so far for Jonathan Kuminga. Draymond's a little bit banged up. I think Kuminga's going to take that starting role for the first couple games until Draymond's healthy. But Kuminga had a very good preseason, showing the best promise of his career so far. Looked like he had a real good ability to score the ball, was rebounding the ball really well. But I've basically at this point I've seen to only be addressing my concerns. But if I'm going to put them at number four to be an NBA champ contender, there's a reason for that, and that reason is Steph Curry. Obviously, this is a team that has won multiple championships before. They have that playoff experience. They have that championship experience. Steve Kerr knows how to coach the guys. Obviously, Steph, Draymond, Clay, Wiggins all have rings. Um, this team has a lot of experience. While Chris Paul does not have a ring, that he's certainly not lacking in experience at all. This is probably the most experienced, smartest team in the league. And with that in mind, I like what they can potentially bring to the table. As a threat in the Western Conference. Obviously, the Western Conference is loaded. Every team out there has a lot of talent, but no one has a true breakaway talent quite yet to separate from the rest of the pack. You don't really know who's going to be the one seed. You don't really know who's going to be the eight seed. I think it's going to be a real tight window in there. Um, and I think Golden State's experience will really help them with that. Moving on to number three, I have the Boston Celtics. Last year, 57-25 record, which was second in the East. However, they did get bounced out in the second round of the playoffs. Uh, Actually, I believe it was the third round of the playoffs, excuse me, to the Miami Heat. Their Vegas line is set at over under 54.5 wins, and they are plus 380 to be NBA champions. That is tied for first. Obviously, this team got a lot better in terms of star power. They added Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, which allows them to run at a very star-studded lineup when you're going from the one all the way down to the five when you can go Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis. There's a lot of talent right there in that starting lineup. But on the flip side of that, they lost Malcolm Brogdon, Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, and Grant Williams. So the bench is definitely lacking there. Kristaps Porzingis is a guy that's never really been able to stay healthy for a long period of time. Has struggled to play in more than 40 or 50 games for a majority of his career. So if he's unable to stay healthy in Boston, they're going to really have to rely on Al Horford, who's getting older, getting slower, not quite the player he was even 2 or 3 years ago. And I think that's kind of a concern for me. Obviously, the talent is there. Anytime you can have two players along the lines of a Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, you have a chance to win the championship every single year. Boston has made an NBA Finals before, but I think that depth is the main reason that I have them at three here. Um, I just I just don't really know what's going to happen if they get too banged up and who's going to be able to step up for them. And I'm not quite on the Joe Mazzulla train as a head coach. I thought that he definitely struggled and got exposed last year in the playoffs and got out coached. Going from guys like Brad Stevens and Yume Udoka, uh, I just thought those guys were a lot better coaches than what we see with Missoula. And I think that's another issue that's hurting Boston. But obviously, like I said, the talent is good enough. That they have potential to win it all. And I haven't really even touched on Drew Holiday yet. You look at him and you look at Derek White. That's going to be a very, very good defensive front court, especially when you're going to have to play against, the guys I mentioned earlier, and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, and a guy that I'm about to mention here in a minute or two, Damian Lillard. Uh, you're going to have to slow those guys down if you want to win. I think the playoffs is really guard oriented for the most part, and they have two of the best defensive guards out there. However, they did lose Marcus Smart, the guy that kind of was the glue guy for that Boston team for so many years, and his real toughness. I think there's a difference between being a good defensive player and being a tough player. And Marcus Smart actually had the ability to do both of those. He was a guy that wasn't afraid to get in a scrap, wasn't afraid to go poke his head into situations, to maybe be an instigator at time too. And I think that kind of brought an edge to Boston that they're certainly losing now. Uh, as you know, Porzingis and Drew Holiday are good players. They just don't have that edge to them. Moving on to number two, I have another team in the Eastern Conference, and that is the Milwaukee Bucks. Last year, Milwaukee was the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. They posted a 58 and 24 record. However, they were bounced in the first round of the playoffs as an upset to the 8 seed Miami Heat, who eventually went on to make the NBA Finals. Their over under is set at 53.5 wins. That is five less than the previous season, and they are plus 380 to be NBA champs, tied with the Celtics for best odds in the league. The main reason that they are tied for the best odds in the league is because they had a serious addition in the offseason of Damian Lillard, an all-star, all pro caliber guard. One of the most explosive players in the league in terms of the ability to score points in bunches. He's a guy that can go out and drop 40 or 50 points at any given night if he really wants to. Um, He's a very clutch player. We've seen him hit some very big shots up in Portland. He brings another edge to what this Milwaukee team can do. They also brought in Malik Beasley and Cameron Payne to kind of round out that guard rotation, and then they brought in a new head coach in Adrian Griffin, who was a former Raptors assistant. However, on the flip side, they did lose both Grayson Allen and Drew Holiday, as well as old head coach Mike Budenholzer, and it's kind of a philosophy change, I think, is what I'm seeing from the Bucks for this upcoming season. When you think of Drew Holiday and Grayson Allen, those guys are pretty good defensive players, especially Drew Holiday. He's an all defensive player of the year candidate type of player. And when you replace them with a Damian Lillard, a guy that's not a defensive player at all, it's going to be an interesting change there. Malik Beasley is a guy that's a very good shooter. He's shown that in both stints with the Wolves and the Lakers. And then obviously Cameron Payne was a pretty successful backup point guard for a few years in Phoenix. All those guys, though, are offensive minded players. None of them are defensive minded players. And I think that that will be a new change for the Bucks. When you have guys like Giannis, Brooke Lopez, Drew Holiday, you have a lot more of a defensive mindset. Now they're moving on to much more of an offensive mindset. Obviously, Chris Middleton's still in the fray there, although he's kind of banged up. Has a recurring knee injury. They've really worked him in slowly so far in the preseason. Kind of had some load management stuff going on there, trying to keep him healthy. But the idea of what a Damian Lillard pick and roll with Giannis can look like, or even, Brooke Lopez is a guy that could maybe do a pick and pop type thing with Damian Lillard. He's got a nice shot there. Um, I just think that there's going to be a lot of ways for them to get the offense clicking. And like I said, the new head coach, Adrian Griffin, came from Toronto. He won a ring up there when Kawhi was there. But, they did a lot of things up in Toronto where they worked through their bigs. You guys like Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes had a lot of the ball in their hands at times up in Toronto. And I think what Griffin learned working with those guys, if he can apply that same philosophy to Giannis, it's going to work out pretty well for them. And then my number one team that I think is the favorite to win the NBA championship is the team that won it all last year. I think they have a real chance to repeat, and that is the Denver Nuggets. Last year, their regular season record was 53 wins to 29 losses. Vegas has their over/under line set at 52 and a half, and they're plus 550 odds to repeat as NBA champions. They didn't really bring in anyone this offseason to help, add depth to the team, add more firepower to the team. However, they did lose Bruce Brown and Jeff Green, which aren't crushing losses, but they do certainly hurt. They were very good glue guys, very good role players. Both those guys had good postseasons, especially Bruce Brown. It's the reason that he got paid, and that could be a concern. But I look at the Bucks roster, and I think they have guys that are able to step up and fill those holes. You look at Christian Brown from Kansas. He's shown some flashes last year and what he can do. But I think now that he's going to be elevated to more full-time role, he's got another year underneath his belt in the league. He's going to be able to fill that Bruce Brown role. But that's not really what matters for this team. What matters is they have a guy by the name of Nikola Jokic, the best player in the league. Jokic is a guy that can go score 30 points. He can go get 12 assists and he can go get 12 rebounds on any given night. He's just a threat from any part of the floor. The way he passes, the way he shoots, I mean, the guy shoots 63% from field goal range. That's insane. 63%, especially for a guy that has the ball in his hands as much as he does. You don't see that type of percentages. Uh, he also is a pretty good three-point shooter. It's pretty wild watching him chuck some of these one-leg fadeaways up. They look so ugly. You wonder what the fuck are you doing, Jokic? But it always seems to fall. And when you have a guy like that, it's going to be hard to lose. But I think the most important aspect for this Denver Nuggets team in terms of success is that they are built to play with each other. I think that's a lost element in the game nowadays. I think a lot of times it's looking for star power, it's looking for these superstar guys. Um, and I don't think they put a lot of consideration in how they all mesh or fit together. When you look at the way that Jamal Murray, KCP, MPJ, Aaron Gordon, Jokic, how they fit into that starting five, it's just perfect. Guys like KCP, MPJ, electric shooters, especially from the corners. You're oftentimes able to find Jokic doing these swing passes from one block all the way to the opposite corner to hit MPJ. Um, Jamal Murray took another step up in his game this past year in the playoffs. And then obviously the way Aaron Gordon cuts off and moves around Jokic. I believe Jokic to Aaron Gordon was the most uh, common assisted basket in the league last year in terms of one player getting assist with another player. Those Jokic to Aaron Gordon was the number one in the league. And a lot of that was the way, Jokic was able to find Gordon for some lobs, for easy buckets like that. Um, his cuts, backdoor especially to get to the basket are really good as well. And though I think just the way that team fits together is the main reason that I could see them repeating again as NBA champions. So moving on to my starting five of the top five MVP candidates for the upcoming season. When you look at MVP candidates, they most of the times have to be the best player on a playoff caliber team, specifically a top four seed. Last year, Joel Embiid won it. He was the best player on the Philadelphia 76ers team that I believe got third in the Eastern Conference. Um, so yeah, you aren't going to be able to see a guy um, For example, like a Victor Wembanyama, I'm not sure he'll be good enough year one to win the MVP anyway, but I don't also have expectations for the Spurs to make any deep runs or to even make the playoffs, which will hurt his chances to win it. So all these guys that are coming up are guys that are probably going to be on playoff teams and be the best player on that team. And at number five, I have De'Aaron Fox. Vegas has his MVP odd plus at or set at plus 4,000. Um, Last season, in a rejuberant Sacramento Kings team, he averaged 25 points per game, shot 51% from the field, 32% from three, 4.2 rebounds per game, 6.1 assists per game, and 1.1 steals per game. The thing that really sticks out to me there is the shooting splits between his field goal percentage and his 3-point percentage. For a guard, it's pretty good to see someone shooting over 50% from the field, and that's what De'Aaron Fox gave them last year. However, 32% is a below average shooting from three, and it's something that De'Aaron's going to have to take a step up if he wants to be the MVP and if he wants to bring more success to the Sacramento Kings. Obviously, not many people had high expectations for the Kings last year. They were kind of written off early, especially after last season when they traded away Tyrese Halliburton to the Pacers in exchange for Domantas Sabonis. However, that trade was a much better trade for the Kings than it was for the Pacers, as in like half a season for the most part, it was able to change them from a Western Conference bottom dweller to a top four seed in the West. And you know they had one of the best crowds in the league last year. The way they would light the beam on the stadium after wins, became a very tough place to play inside Sacramento there. And they kept that team mostly together going into next season. I think you're going to be able to see a lot more excitement from Sacramento. And at the end of the day, De'Aaron Fox is probably the fastest player in the league. There are not many guys that can keep up with him when he drives to the basket, or if he looks to go coast to coast on a fast break. Not many people can hold up with him there. Um, the thing that also I think helps his chances to win the MVP is that Domantas Sabonis is another one of those bigs that has a real good passing ability, which often helps him find De'Aaron Fox for some easy buckets. Uh, Anytime that you have the chance to play with a big that can create offense for you, it's a huge, like, it takes a lot off your back. In terms of what you're expected to do, how much of the offense you have to carry, and I think that's going to help them a lot. Keegan Murray, their rookie last year, looked very good on both sides of the floor. He's going to continue to take a step up, but he was a great shooter, which obviously helped what they were looking to do out there as well. They have some other good shooters on the team. Obviously, Kevin Horter started the year really hot from three, eventually fell off. I think a lot of that happened during the 3-point contest there. But De'Aaron Fox is a guy that I really like his chances to be an MVP candidate this year, and especially because it's kind of under the value when you think of the superstars in the league that have the name values of like the LeBron Jameses, the Kevin Durant's, the James Hardens. His name value isn't at that same level, but I think he's just as good as a player from what we saw last year. At number four, I have Anthony Edwards. This one shouldn't become as a shock as it seems like most people are really high on Anthony Edwards going on into this year, and that's with good reason. The last two things we've seen out of Anthony Edwards has continually to open our eyes, and that is what he did for Team USA and also his 5 games in the playoffs last year against the Denver Nuggets in the first round. Obviously, the Minnesota Timberwolves got eliminated in that first round to the Nuggets, but his play in that series in particular opened a lot of eyes. His odds to win the MVP this year are plus 3,000. Last year in the regular season, Ant's stats were 24.6 points per game. He shot 45% from field goal range, 36% from three, 5.8 rebounds per game, 4.4 assists per game, and 1.6 steals per game. But something that is really telling to me is when you look at that 5 game series against Denver in round one in the playoffs, he averaged 31.6 point per games, elevated his shooting percentage to 48%, and also increased his assist to 5.2 per game. When you have a guy that can elevate his play in the playoffs, kind of what they like to say a Mamba mentality at times is Kobe Bryant was very good at doing something like that. It certainly helps your chances to get picked up by the media because at the end of the day, media attention is another thing that help drives the MVP voting race. And I think Ant's a guy that's going to be in the media a lot this year. He's got a very colorful personality. A lot of people like him, and this Minnesota team is going to be very interesting. Um, about 5 minutes before I started recording this video, Shams broke news that the T Wolves had agreed to a 5-year contract extension with Jaden McDaniels. About $136 million, I believe, was the figure reported on that, which is going to send the Minnesota Timberwolves deep into the luxury tax, which means they are committed to winning now. You look at that roster: Rudy Gobert, Carl Anthony Towns, Jaden McDaniels. Um, those are guys that are expected to play good basketball, but none of them are expected to be the number one dog over Anthony Edwards. He's the man expected to lead the ship, to be the number one option, to be the killer for the Wolves out there. And I think it's definitely going to happen. Another underrated aspect about Ant, especially when you look at his playoff numbers, is that the trade deadline they were able to move on from D'Angelo Russell to bring in Mike Conley. Two very different types of players there. D'Lo's a little bit more me first, while Conley's a little bit more team first. That certainly comes with age, as Mike's more of a veteran player. But I think Mike definitely helped unlock a better Anthony Edwards, and we saw that in the playoffs. Uh, having a less selfish player out there, allowing Ant to get his shot a little bit more, helping him create offense as well, versus just looking for, as like D'Lo looked for his own shot. It's going to help there, and they're going to continue to build on that. Um, Hopefully, Carl Anthony Towns will be able to play a full season this year for Minnesota. He obviously had that injury last year, which made him miss most of the season. As a result, there was kind of an issue meshing with him and Rudy Gobert. I think that's going to be a little bit smoothed out coming into this season. They had an entire off season to work together to get that figured out. Chris Finch is a pretty good offensive mind, having also worked in Toronto at times. I have a lot of respect for guys that worked with Nick Nurse up in Toronto, especially when it comes to working with bigs and getting them to initiate some offense. It's going to be fun to see the types of rotations that Minnesota is going to be able to bust out using those two centers, also having guys like Nas Reed, and then most importantly, maybe even Kyle Anderson, a forward that can kind of do a little bit of point guard play at times to change around what you're looking from the offense. They're going to be able to provide a lot of different schematics and looks, and I think that's going to help Ant moving on as a potential playoff, excuse me, as a potential MVP candidate this season. At number three, I'm going to go with Luka Doncic. His MVP odds are plus 550. Last season, he averaged 32.4 points per game, 49% from field goal range, 34% from 3 point land, 8.6 rebounds per game, 8 assists per game, and 1.4 steals per game. Um, Luka's a guy that's kind of lost a little bit of steam that he had going for him. People are kind of starting to wonder if he's a little bit more overrated than we thought at first. Is he really the winner that we thought he was? A lot of that happened at the trade deadline. They went and acquired Kyrie Irving, and the team didn't really move up with that trade. Instead, they kind of fell down. However, when you look at Luka Doncic, he has no notable stats decreased from his time pre Kyrie Irving to post Kyrie Irving, and I think that says a lot to the talent of Luca, that when you're able to add a player like Kyrie Irving into the offense and you still aren't seeing a huge decrease in your numbers, it's probably a good thing for you. I have had questions at times about Luca's ability to play in an offense with another ball dominant player. We saw that at the beginning of his career playing alongside Dennis Smith Jr. However, it looks like things are probably going to be a little bit smoothed out by the time this season starts. They were able to get rid of Christian Wood, who I think was a little bit of a locker room issue. There wasn't a very good defensive center, was looking for the ball quite a bit. Um, they brought in guys like Grant Williams, Rashawn Holmes, and then drafted Derek Lively. I think that's going to be help them be a little bit more balanced as a team. You look at Grant Williams; he spent a lot of time in Boston. Pretty good defensive player, really good shooter, and most importantly, a guy that really works his ass off. He's a tough guy, really wants to grind out there. And then Rashawn Holmes and Derek Lively are a lot better defensive centers, at least, than what they had for Christian Wood. And I think that's going to help them man up the middle, because neither of those two guards, and Luca and Kyrie Irving, are great defensively. However, having that added threat of Grant Williams on the perimeter is definitely going to help Luca. When it comes to passing the ball, getting looks open for him. If the ball's in Kyrie Irving's hands and he's driving to the rim, and you see Grant Williams open in the corner, you're going to have that shift over to try to prevent that pass over to Grant Williams, which is going to allow Luca to maybe, be double teamed less or have the focus off him less to maybe take advantage of those one-on-one matchups or maybe have more catch and shoot opportunities. Obviously, 34% from three is not a very good percentage for what we think of Luka Doncic. We think of him as an elite three-point shooter. I think a lot of that is he took too many shots. And I think if he can wisen up that three-point shot percentage and get that percentage up, he's definitely going to be a real MVP threat. At number two, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo, a man that has won an MVP before. His odds to win the MVP are plus 600. Last year, he averaged 31.1 points per game. He shot 55% from field goal range, 27% from three-point land, 11.8 rebounds per game, and 5.7 assists per game. Um, the thing that I thought was telling looking at his defensive stats from last year is he only averaged zero point 0.8 steals per game and zero point 0.8 blocks per game, which I thought was honestly low for Giannis. I thought he would have a lot better numbers in that aspect. But when you think about the perimeter defense that Drew Holiday provided, as well as the overall rim protection that Brooke Lopez brings, it kind of makes sense why those numbers are a bit low. And I think they will go up again this year. Um, with Damian Lillard there instead of Drew Holiday, there's going to be a lot more drives to the rim. It's going to make Giannis have to play a lot more aggressively in terms of protecting the rim. Because with Brooke Lopez last year, he kind of hovered close to the paint, knowing that he had good perimeter defenders in Giannis and Drew Holiday out there, so that if someone didn't manage to skate by, he was already out there to just get the block. There's going to be a lot more reliance now on both Giannis and Brooke Lopez defensively with Drew out of the mix. And I think if we could see Giannis increase those block numbers up to two or three per game, a steal a game, a steal and a half per game, it's going to help make his stats look even better than they already are. Plus, like I mentioned above, Damian Lillard has joined the mix. A great offensive piece. The way he can pick and roll with Giannis will be very electric, in my opinion. And I wouldn't be shocked if you also see Giannis's assists per game go up, playing alongside a guy that can shoot as well as Damian Lillard does. Obviously, Giannis is such a threat getting down to the basket, and you see that with his 55% field goal percentage. He doesn't really miss a ton when he's down low. Uh, can really go make a commotion, getting in that low block. Using his body to kick a space to go get a layup. If he kind of continues to do that, gets those drives to the basket, and people collapse down on him, if he can kick out to a wide open Damian Lillard, Dame's going to hit that shot all the time. And I think that's going to be a huge piece on what could help Giannis win another MVP. And then number one, a guy that probably, in my opinion, should have won the MVP last year, Nikola Jokic. His MVP odds are plus 430. Last season, he averaged 24.5 points per game, 63% field goal percentage, 38% from three, 11.8 rebounds per game, 9.8 assists per game. Yeah, he almost averaged a triple double. Um, and like I said, I believe he should have won the MVP last year, but I think there was a little bit of voter fatigue, which is why Joel Embiid got it. Now that we've had a year off from the Jokic MVP award, I think that he's back in the running, and that kind of eliminates Joel as a default. I don't think we really love trying to give it to guys back to back anymore. Um, we saw that with Harden. We saw that with Giannis. But Jokic is a guy has not shown any issues with injuries. Seems to be very durable. He's going to play in 65 games this year, probably more than that. Uh, and whenever and the thing is, if he's going to play, he's going to put up numbers no matter what's going on around him. Whether he has Jamal Murray, whether he doesn't have Jamal Murray, that doesn't change a whole lot on Jokic's ability to take over the game as a transcendent player in passing and rebounding and scoring. Uh, we all know what he does. The fact that he's a walking triple double says it the most to me. I think Jokic is definitely the number one guy in terms of chances to win the MVP again this year. So yeah, Jokic is my MVP favorite. Moving on to my five players to watch for this upcoming season. At number five, I'm taking a little bit of a cheat, having two guys there, but they're both on the same teams. Both just joined this team this offseason. And that is Bruce Brown and Obi Toppin of the Indiana Pacers. Um, both of these guys are pretty decent players that didn't seem to have a very big role at times for their previous teams. Bruce Brown last year averaged 11.5 points per game, 4.1 rebounds per game, and 3.4 assists per game. You saw a step up in his play as well in the postseason as a pretty reliable member of the Denver Nuggets. Meanwhile, Obi Toppin last year averaged 7.4 points per game and 2.8 rebounds per game while only getting 15 minutes per game up in New York. I expect to see both of these guys be a really crucial piece to this Indiana Pacers team that's looking to move on to the next step. They have the young pieces there in Tyrese Halliburton as well as Benedict Mathurin. Obviously, Miles Turner's the guy that's been there for center for multiple years now, but they've kind of been trying to figure out the best way to fill those other holes around them. Buddy Hield played a lot of two guard for them, but it looks like he's on the trade block after not being able to agree to a contract extension. Chris Duarte is no longer in town either. He has found his way to Sacramento, and the power forward position seems up for grabs. Jalen Smith had it a little bit last year. You could see potential or first round pick Jarris Walker out of Houston try to make that his own, but ultimately I think Obi Toppin's the guy that will have the first shot at it, and I think both of those guys are going to be crucial pieces for what Indiana is trying to do to take that next step. Obviously, when you're playing with a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, he's a great creator, loves to get his teammates involved. And I think these are guys he's definitely going to be looking for. They both have the ability to shoot the ball. They are both smart players in terms of continuing the offense, not being a black hole whenever they catch the ball. And most importantly, I'm intrigued to see what Obi Toppin will be able to do playing more than 15 minutes a game. He's a very high energy guy. I loved him at Dayton, one of the most electric players in college. Never really seemed to find that same groove in New York. Uh, I think that's kind of a Tibbs thing at times up there, but playing alongside Miles Turner, I think will be a huge help to him as well as Miles is a great defensive player and also can stretch the floor, allowing, Obi Toppin to take some of the low post at times where he's been so physical and had such a prominence for being able to dunk the ball both on the drive and also just, kind of just going upstanding and slamming on it. I would like to see that 2.8 rebounds per game go up, but like I said, playing 15 minutes a game, it can be tough to see those numbers go up. But I think Indiana is a team that should be improved thanks to these two players. At number four, I have a guy that I'm sure many of you know the name of and might be shocked to see him on a player to watch list, and that's Ben Simmons, the former All Star. Ever since his bad postseason in Philadelphia series against Atlanta, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, man, time flies now. He's never really caught on to the same steam he had before that when he was an all star. However, watching him play this preseason, he seems to have found his love for basketball again in a pretty unique Brooklyn Nets setup. A lot of those guys are pretty positionless and very versatile around them. You could see Ben Simmons playing, point guard, small forward, power forward, maybe even center in some lineups. Cam Johnson's a guy that could play 3-4. Mikael Bridges could play 2-3-4. Claxton 4-5. I believe Dorian Finney-Smith's there is a guy that could be a 3-4 or 5. I like that position versatility for them to have a lot of defense on the floor, and I think that's where Brooklyn could have success. Obviously, Ben Simmons was a defensive stud in Philadelphia. And even while his offensive game has faltered over the past couple seasons, that defense still has been there. They were just looking to get that offense back. He used to be almost a 20-point per game scorer. Last year, in 42 games, he only averaged 6.9 points per game, 6.3 rebounds per game, 6.1 assists per game, and 1.3 steals per game. So while he's still very involved in the overall flow of the game in terms of getting rebounds, assists, his scoring average has definitely gone down. And I think we'll finally see that step back up again this year as he's found his comfort with his teammates as well as his love of the game again. It looks to me that he's healthy. He doesn't seem to have that back issue anymore. Um, he's looked like he's had really good movement watching some preseason games. A lot of good cuts to the basket. Doesn't seem to be hindered as much as he used to be. And I think this could finally be the Ben Simmons bounce back season we've been hoping for. And for the sake of the Brooklyn Nets, I hope so because they have the chance to be a real fun team with all the unique pieces they have up there. At number three, we're going up north to Toronto for Gary Trent Jr., a guy that I think is going to have to take a lot more of the offensive load up in Toronto now that Fred VanVleet's gone. With Freddie gone, I'm not quite sure who will be the main starting point guard for Toronto. It might be Dennis Schroeder. It might potentially be Gary Trent Jr., but he's more of a shooting guard. Last year, for Gary Trent, averaged 17.4 points per game, 36% from three, and 1.6 assists per game. I think he's a guy that, with the increased load on offense, you'll see a very fun year from him. He's a pretty good shooter, but he does need to get his teammates involved a little bit more. He is kind of a black hole at times where he gets that shot up. Like I said, 1.6 per game. If he's going to be the main point guard for Toronto, he's going to have to get that number up to 4 or 5 assists per game. And hopefully, if he could get that 3 point shooting percentage up from 36% to 38% to maybe into the 40s, you'll see a great year from Gary Trent Jr. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets up into the 20 point per game range as well. I think he's in for a huge year just by default of, Fred VanVleet going out of town and needing someone to fill that guard spot. Toronto has a lot of forwards with OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam. Uh, it'll be interesting to see how they initiate their guard play now. And then at number two, I have Zaire Williams with the Memphis Grizzlies. I probably will touch a little bit more on why I think he's going to have a good year another segment. But the main reason is here that I think he's going to play a lot more. Last year, he only played in 37 games and only averaged 15 minutes per game, but he had 5.7 points per game and 2.1 rebounds per game. Williams is a very versatile wing. He's about 6'7", 6'8", can play a variety of different positions. He's lengthy, moves well or left and right well. Horizontally, that's the word I was looking for. A good defender. And, at times it seems like he was supposed to be a good prospect for what the Grizzlies were looking to do. But I think they almost played out of their timeline a little bit too much that didn't allow him to get as many minutes as he should have. Um, some guys are going to be out of town now, which should open up that free range for him to play more minutes and hopefully more free as well. And then my number one player to watch out for this year is Gabe Vincent. Gabe Vincent signed a contract in the offseason with the Los Angeles Lakers, leaving the Miami Heat. Um, Last season in Miami, averaged 9.4 points per game, 2.5 assists per game, and then in the playoffs, increased his scoring to above 13 points per game. Um, Obviously, joining LeBron James is going to be a huge step for him. The Lakers always have the attention of the world on them, no matter what's going on, good or bad. And that's just what happens being on the LeBron James team. I think Vincent will be the primary point guard for this team, opposed to D'Angelo Russell. And I think they're really going to have a lot of trust in him this year to initiate the offense. D'Lo, like I said earlier, was a little bit more of a selfish player compared to the selflessness of Gabe Vincent. He was an undrafted guy that Miami kind of made into their own with hard work and toughness. And I think the Lakers are going to reward that this season. And I think he's in for a pretty fun year playing alongside LeBron and AD. That 2.5 assists per game number is definitely going to increase up into 4 or 5 points or assists per game. And I think he's still going to be able to play his own game, relatively speaking. LeBron at times similar to Jimmy Butler, AD similar to Bam Adebayo. I wouldn't be shocked to see similar play from him as a whole. And lastly, moving on to my starting five letdown teams in the league. At number five, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. This one just stems from a lot of, uh, just there's disagreements going on a lot in Philadelphia. The general manager Daryl Morey doesn't seem to be getting along with James Harden, which has led to James Harden wanting out of Philadelphia. Nothing seems to be really progressing on terms of a trade for that going on, and it doesn't look like James Harden's probably going to play in the meantime while that's going on. He hasn't been reporting to training camp or practice. Um, it's just not really unsure how that's going to go. He's very publicly called out Daryl Morey, saying he is a liar. And I just think that the vibes overall in Philadelphia seem to be low. Doc Rivers is out of town finally. Nick Nurse is now in. I think that's an overall upgrade for them at coaching, especially what I think Nick Nurse will be able to unlock with Joel Embiid. However, if the Harden situation continues to get messier, if no trade develops, I really think the 76ers could be in trouble of a down season. Uh, Especially, it's just a tough spot for them as they're all around because they need to get rid of Harden, but it doesn't seem like there's much assets out there. But his talent is good enough that they need something good enough in return to help them continue to be a threat. The main piece I've seen kind of talked about is Terrence Mann from the Clippers. The Clippers don't really want to part with him. However, he's a 27-year-old. He's been in the league for 5 years. I feel like we already know kind of what Terrence Mann is as a player. I don't think he's really going to grow much more. Certainly not going to bloom into a future All Star or anything at this rate. And I'm not sure even if he would help elevate the Sixers in the terms of a trade. Norman Powell's another guy that would maybe come over for them, but I don't think either of those guys could fill the hole of what James Harden provided. He's been the top assist guy in the league for the past 2 years now. Uh, Out there in Philadelphia, and you're going to have to put a lot more reliance on Tyrese Maxey, who is a very good young player, but he hasn't necessarily had to steer the ship as much as he will this year without Harden around, and that's why I think the 76ers are in for a down spot. At number four, I have the Memphis Grizzlies. Um, I think there's going to be a lot of issues in Memphis this year, kind of why I think Zaire might be a player to watch. Um, John Morant is suspended for the first 25 games of the season. Tyus Jones is no longer around. He is in Washington. Professional instigator Dylan Brooks is gone. He is now in Houston. And Steven Adams is out for the entire season following a knee injury. That's a lot of pieces that are going to be gone from what we know of the Memphis Grizzlies. Obviously, Marcus Smart has joined the team. He's going to be looking to provide that leadership and toughness for them, the grit and grind Grizzly way. Jaron Jackson Jr. still in the fold, but the main thing that's helped Memphis for the past 2 years is they've been able to get out to hot starts, which they've been able to ride to pretty good seeding in the playoffs. They're not going to have that advantage this year. I don't think they'll be able to have home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs this year. Jaw is going to be a huge loss for them for those first 25 games. I'm not quite sure what they're going to do down low at the forward position, if they're going to try to make Jaron the center full time, if they ride with Xavier Tillman. They also have Kenny Lofton on the roster, although he came in very overweight for training camp. Um, that's why I think all those guys leaving is going to have an increase for Zaire Williams. Dylan Brooks is a lot bigger of a loss than people like to admit, just due to, people don't like his personality. I don't blame them. But, he was a guy that scored the basketball, played a lot of really good defense. And there's going to be some issues, I think, in Memphis for the, first couple months as a whole. Which is why I wouldn't be shocked to see them as maybe like a play-in type team versus, that 2 or 3 seed we've come to expect of them the past 2 or 3 seasons. At number three, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder, which may seem like a little bit of a weird team to put in there, considering they haven't been lights out the past couple of years. But it seems like they're definitely become the most overrated team this offseason. A lot of people have a lot of high hopes and thoughts for them, which is fair. Well, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander had a great season last year, was one of the best players in the entire league. Obviously, Josh Giddey's a very fun player alongside of him. Um, he is a guard, but he has a little bit more of that all-around guardness play, kind of what you thought of like a James Harden or Russell Westbrook for a while. He's like a guard Jokic, actually. His passing's very good, and it's kind of his priority over scoring there. And then we finally get to see Chet Holmgren join the team this year after an injury kept him out all of last year. There's other pieces around there, people like Lou Dort, great defender there. Um, Trey Mann's a point guard that has shown some signs at times. Pukievsky is a forward that can shoot it and stretch it. It's going to be interesting to see how they all fit together, but I just think there's a little bit too much hype around them. From what I've seen, a lot of it comes from the love of Shea and Chet, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to live up to that hype. And I'm not even sure they'll make the playoffs this year. Um, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I still think they're allowed to be another year or two away. This will be Chet's rookie season. It's expected for him to maybe have some ups and downs with that. And I just think that this will be not as good as of a season for OKC as most people are expecting. At number two, I have the team that represented the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals, the Miami Heat. Um, Man, the Heat had a tough offseason. They lost Gabe Vincent and Max Strus in free agency. They were trying to get Damian Lillard, but ultimately they just got trolled. It makes you wonder if there's a little bit of discontent with Tyler Hero, knowing his name was consistently in those trade rumors, and now he's just going to be there. Um, I'm just not really sure what to expect coming back from Miami to fill those holes. I'm not sure who the point guard's going to be. Kyle Lowry's still very old and has continually got worse for the past 3 or 4 seasons now. There is going to be that reliance on Tyler Hero now. However, he missed most of the postseason in which the Heat played their best basketball of the year. So it makes you wonder if he's a positive or a negative for that team. Josh Richardson has come back to play for the Heat where he started his career, um, but anything more than a role piece for him is a little bit too much. I just think that while Miami has been known for that Heat culture, their ability to find those undrafted rookies and develop them into great players, I just don't think there's enough going for them right now uh, to be a true contender again this year. And while most people did write them off last year, I think the write off this year makes a lot more sense on paper due to the moving pieces. They don't have the guys that know the offense as well as last year. Struess and Vincent were veteran guys for them that had been there for a few years. And then my number one letdown team this season. If you haven't figured it out by now, I'm a little bit shocked. I bet most people thought these guys would be in my NBA championship list. Nope, it is here at number one, the Phoenix Suns. I do not like their roster construction. Plain and simple. I don't like their roster construction. I don't understand what they're going to be doing at point guard with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, and I don't think either of those guys are able to play point guard. I'm not a very big fan of Bradley Beal. I don't think he passes the ball. I think he's kind of a black hole on offense, and how that works alongside Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, it doesn't. The only beneficial thing from them is they were able to move on from DeAndre Ayton to Nurkic. A lot worse of a defensive player, certainly, but Nurkic is a lot more of a creator from that low post block than Ayton was, which might be helpful for getting the offense to roll. But even then, when you think of having guys like Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Nurkic, those are guys on big money contracts, and as a result, the rest of the team are on minimum contracts, and their talent kind of reflects that. Josh Kogi is a guy that's bounced around for a few years now due to his inability to play offense. He is a decent defender, but I don't know. It's just they don't have a ton of depth overall. They were able to bring in Grayson Allen from the trade. I got rid of Aiton, but even then, like you can't. Are you going to play him alongside Beal and Booker? And even then, he's not a point guard either. He's a good defender, though. Um, I just don't see how this team fits together well enough to have any form of success personally. And that's why I think the Phoenix Suns are going to be the number one letdown team this year in the NBA. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching that. I love talking about the NBA, like I mentioned before. I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts on this video were. If you think that the Phoenix Suns are an NBA champs contender, let me know. If you think I'm wrong, maybe you think one of the teams I thought was a contender isn't. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on that. Um, Comment below your number one letdown team, your number one player to watch, your number one MVP candidate, and your number one NBA Finals champs contender. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts below. Until then, I should have another video out tomorrow. Like my usuals, going over this weekend's football, talking about that. But until then, I hope you guys leave a like on this video, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, and most importantly, I hope you guys continue to stay blessed.